Okay, let's talk about how we print. This is the block that I've been working on. And so now what I want to do is, since I was cutting on this, I want to make sure it's very, very clean. So I've cleaned it off. I took a paper towel and made sure there's no little pieces of linoleum on it. And so now I need to put the ink on it. Now, each of you will have a tube where you will just take the tube and squeeze a little bit out. And it's a good idea to have, say, a plastic fork, or excuse me, a plastic knife, and you can spread it out a little bit, and then you'll start to spread it out with your brayer. I'm going to use this ink out of a jar, since that's what we have at school. So I'll spread it out a little bit. This is my brayer. You'll probably call it a roller. But anyway, so I'm going to start to move the ink back and forth. And it'll get a texture that it looks like it's dimply or something like that. And that's what you're looking for. So now I'm going to take my block I'm going to try to get a nice even coat on it. And I'm going to turn it and roll the other direction. Okay. And I want that same stippled look on this, where it has kind of a texture to it. I'll set that aside. Now the paper that I have should be slightly larger in all directions, about 1.5 inches in each direction. And so what I'm going to do is very, very carefully, I can place it on this way. And now we need something to print with. And you can use a plastic spoon where you just put your finger here and you start to rub it back and forth to transfer. You can also get a spoon, a metal spoon. Now don't use the Good Family spoons and things like that. Get just an old spoon and you can rub with this. You want to go back and forth, change directions, and try to get an even amount of pressure over the entire piece. Now what we can do is we can lift up the paper on one edge, and if it looks good, which this I think is okay, I'll just continue to lift it up. And there's my print. Now, as we talked about in the previous section, it's a mirror image of the way that I carved it out. And so if you're doing a print that has some type of text on it, letters and things like that, you have to take that into account. Okay. Now, once everything's dry, what do we do? How do we present this? if this is my print, I want to make sure that the piece is fairly centered in the paper, and I have plenty of room around it, because typically what we do is we cut a mat that will cover around it. But we need to label it, and so traditionally what we do is for prints we use a pencil. And so they're down here, you're going to put either AP, which stands for artist proof, and so I'll do it on this side. I'd put AP, and that's an artist proof, and that's usually the first one that you pull when you're doing prints. Once you've decided that it's exactly like you want it, then you decide how large an edition is it going to be. And if you want to make an edition of, say, 10, this might be 1 of 10, so you put a 1/10, okay, and then you're going to give it a name, and I'm going to put Apple here. And then I would put my name, and then I would put the date, and I put, right now I just put 2020. Okay, and that is how you label this. You want to keep all of your labeling inside the border here, because what's going to happen is eventually it's going to be matted. So here's a mat, and so the mat has been cut to leave the border around it. Right here I've got my edition, 5 out of 40, the name, Coastal Pine, my name, and the year that I pulled the print. Okay? And so that's the way that we label them. And of course, if you write clear out here, the mat's going to cut it off. And so that's why you want to make sure that everything's confined within the space of the actual piece. And you also want to make sure that you don't print this right at the bottom where there's no room to write. Okay? Okay, let's talk about cleanup. Now, the nice thing about the inks that we are using is they're all water-based. Block printing, water-soluble, easy cleanup. If we were using an oil base, these might take 3 to 5 days to actually dry. But these will dry probably in about 30 to 60 minutes. So as far as the things that we need to clean off, anything that you used, like the little plastic knife that you use as a palette knife or something like that, those all clean off with water. So the main thing is make sure that you cover your inks quickly, because if they're exposed to the air, they will dry out. So we want to put the caps on our tubes. We also want to make sure that these get cleaned up. And we can just go to a sink, clean it off with water, warm water, and a sponge or a paper towel. If you want to, you can put a little bit of soap, hand soap, or like dish soap or something like that, and that'll make it a little bit quicker to clean. But make sure that you clean up your materials, your tools, all the time. Don't let them just dry out and get hardened. This ink actually will clean off even after it's dried, so that's one advantage. You can take, you're always going to get some ink on you. Paper towel takes it off really quick with a little bit of water on it. And you want to keep your hands fairly clean, because as you're working, you get ink on your hands, you're working with your paper, and pretty soon, you've got a mess. So, okay. So water soluble, easy to clean up. Make sure that you get it cleaned right after you print.